Hello everyone, my name is Hubert and welcome to Teach Me channel. Today we will be looking at Maths GCSE Ratio Basics. I will show you everything you need to know about the basics of ratios, and we will do a couple videos on that because basically I wasn't able to fit everything into this video. So don't worry if I am missing quite a bit here that you need to know, because I will be making more videos. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, first of all, let's understand what ratios are. Well, ratios are a way to tell how we want to split something. So, for example, we have apples, and if we want to split them between two people, and so we could split them in the ratio of 1 to 3. What does that mean? Well, if we have 4 apples, it would mean that 1 apple goes to one person and 3 apples go to another person. If we were to split it 2 to 2, then 2 apples would go to one person, 2 apples would go to another person. If we were to split it 1 to 1, that's the same as 2 to 2. 2 apples would go to one person, 2 apples would go to the other person. So, basically, ratios, we can expand them. We can multiply both sides of the ratio by the same number to reach the numbers that we actually want to use, and we can shorten the ratios by dividing both sides of the ratio by the same number to reach the ratio, the simplest form of the ratio. We will get onto that, don't worry about it, if you didn't quite get it. But the point here is that if we want, the way we would split something is we add those ratios together. So when we add those ratios together, we would get 4. We would get 4 apples, and then we can split them up according to the ratio. So 1 goes on this side, 3 go on this side, like I drew here. So that's the simplest way to deal with this. It will get more complex, but don't worry about it. I will take you through all of it. So first thing we need to actually be able to do is to write down a ratio as a fraction. So here we have a ratio of 1 to 3, as I already explained. But how do we make it into a fraction? Well, how do we do this? Well, first of all, the key here is to always add those two numbers together. So we add 1 plus 3. We add those two numbers together, and that gives us 4. That sort of gives us the total number. That gives us a total number. And that 4 will go at the bottom of the fraction, because that's the total that we will be taking out a fraction of that total. So this will go as a denominator. So if we wanted to express this side as a fraction, 1 out of 3 side, well, then we would put this down as a fraction like so. 1/4. If we want to express this side as a fraction, then we would put it down like so, 3/4. So the key here is to add those two numbers together, and that gives you the denominator, and then it's simple as just putting each of those numbers as denominator at the top side to express a fraction of the total. This shows you the fraction of the total that this ratio represents. Okay, so that's how we would get fractions. So I'm gonna underline this. I'm gonna put a box around it because this is the actual answer. Okay. Now the next thing we need to know is how to express a ratio in its simplest form. What does it mean? Well, what it means is when we get a ratio like so, like I already explained earlier, it can be shortened. So it will show the same ratio but in a simpler way. similar like fractions, where we can shorten the fractions. So we show essentially the same fraction, but in a simpler way. Here we're gonna show this ratio in a simpler way. And how do we shorten ratios to give us the simplest form? Well, it is the same as we would do in fractions. We divide this side by the same number as we divide this side to achieve two numbers that we cannot shorten any further. If you didn't get that, don't worry, I will show you exactly how to do this. So here we have a ratio of 6 to 24. What do we do with this? Well, we divide this side by 6, because we can divide both numbers by 6. So we divide this side by 6, and we divide this side by 6. And that gives us 1, 2, 4. And that's the simplest form of that ratio. It is the same ratio, but it's expressed in much simpler way with much smaller numbers. Okay. However, what if these numbers were really large and you couldn't tell straight away what number we should divide it by? Well, don't worry about that. I have a little trick that should help you with that. So let's copy that down. 6 to 24, the same, because I'm just trying to show you the point here. So this way is the fastest way, but this way is the easiest way if you cannot see, if it's not obvious to you what number you gotta divide both sides by. So what we can do is we can take baby steps. That's what I like to call it. So let's see. Okay, so we can divide both of these by 2, right? So let's do that. We divide both sides by 2, like so. And that will give us 3 to 12, wouldn't it? Yeah, it will give us 3 to 12. Okay. What can we do now? Well, now we can see that we can divide this side by 3, and we can divide this side by 3, so we're gonna do just that. We divide both sides by 3, like so. And we get 1/4. So we arrived at the same answer. We used two different methods to give us the same answer. And both those methods gave us the simplest form. Obviously, this is the fastest way. So if you can see what numbers you should be dividing by, go straight here. Don't mess around with this. Go straight to that method. But if you have some really large or awkward numbers that it is not really obvious what you should be dividing by, then you can take baby steps. You divide by 2 first, or you divide by 3, whatever works. And then you sort of carry on until you get to two numbers that you cannot divide any further. And that is how you know that you reached the simplest form of the given ratio. That's how you know it. Okay, so this is how you do ratios as fractions, and that's how you arrive at the simplest form of ratio. Now let's carry on. So let's carry on with these little topics. Okay, so what if we get decimals? What if we get a fraction, as in a fraction, a decimal fraction, or what if we get a ratio basically that has fraction with decimals? How do we deal with that? Well, so in this case we have 2.6 and 3.2. How do we deal with that? Okay, so the same way we can divide to shorten and we can multiply to expand. That works every time. So what we're gonna try to do here is we will try to multiply so that we get two non-decimal numbers, or divide to get two non-decimal numbers. How on earth do you know which number to multiply by or which number to divide by? Well, you can sort of try and figure this out, but I got a trick that will work every time, and it's really, really simple. So all you gotta do is, if we have only one decimal place, then we multiply both sides by 10. and that will get rid of the decimal. If we have 2 decimal places, then we multiply both sides by 100, and that will get rid of all the decimals every single time. So that's my little trick to figure this one out. Here we only got 1 decimal place, so we multiply both sides by 10 and we will just get rid of these decimal places. So we do it like so. So we multiply both sides by 10 and we get 26 to 32. And here we are. We are at the ratios that no longer have decimals, and now we can take it down to the simplest form. So again, we just have to divide through until we reach the simplest form. So here what I can see is that we can divide by 2. So let's do that. So we divide both sides by 2 and we get 13 to 16, and 13 is a prime number, so we know that this is the simplest form of this ratio. So here the key is to just multiply by 10 and we get ratios without decimals, and then it's just old school simplifying to the simplest form. Okay, so that's how you deal with fractions with decimals. Obviously, like I said, if there were more decimal places, 2 or 3, then you multiply by 100 or 1000 respectively. Okay, what about mixed units? If we have mixed units, how on earth do we deal with that? Well, so here, for example, we have 30 millimeters to 40 centimeters. So we have 2 different sets of units. How do we make the simplest ratio out of that? Well, we just need to convert the units to the same unit. Whatever you do, the units need to be the same. That's the very first thing we need to do. Now, in this case, we can either convert millimeters to centimeters or centimeters to millimeters. Doesn't matter in this case. But in some cases, for example, if say we had 35 millimeters here, if you converted that to centimeters, then you would get a ratio with a decimal. So it's not worth it. It's not worth doing that. So the safest thing to do whenever you're dealing with mixed unit is to convert everything to smallest unit, to the smallest one, because that way you will ensure that you have no decimals in your ratios. So let's do just that. So here we still got 30 millimeters, whereas here, because it's centimeters, we need to convert this to millimeters. We need to multiply that by 10. So here we have 400 millimeters. And now we can shorten it to the simplest form. As you can see here, we can divide both sides by 10. That's a pretty obvious one. You just cross out the zeros. But I am going to do it the proper way. So just divide by 10 both sides, just for the sake of clarity. So here we have 3 millimeters, and here we have 40 millimeters. And that's the ratio. That's our final ratio. So whenever you're dealing with mixed units, always remember to convert everything to the smallest unit, unless you're confident that you can pull off the larger units. But if you get decimals and ratios, then you have to go to this point, and it just gets awkward. It's always the easiest to just convert it to the smallest unit. Okay, so the final thing, we're almost there. The final thing I'm going to cover today is how to bring a ratio to 1 to n form. How do we do that? And what on earth does it mean? Well, 1 to n form means simply that we just force one side, any side of this ratio to be 1. And then the other side doesn't matter, it will be whatever it will be. But 1 to n form means that we want to bring one side of the ratio to 1. And that's useful in some situations later on, so that's actually pretty useful to know. Okay. How do we do that? Again, we just shorten it by dividing. So the simplest way to do this is to divide by the smallest number in this ratio. The smallest number in this ratio is 4. So we divide both sides by 4. We just force it. We divide both sides by 4, and what we get is what we get. That's the point about 1 to n form. So we divide both sides by 4, and that will work every single time. If you had 5 here, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 10 divided by 10 is also 1. So that's how this method works every single time. So it's really useful. So we divide both sides by 4 in this case, because 4 is the smallest number in this ratio. And what do we get? We get 1 to, if you put that in a calculator, what you should get is 14.25. And that's it. That's our 1 to n form. That's our sort of 1 to n form ratio of that ratio. And in this case, in this one case, we don't care that we have a decimal place after, because we are being forced to put this in 1 to n form. Okay, so this is it for today, guys. Thank you again for watching my videos. I really appreciate whenever you guys watch my videos. I hope this helped you immensely. If you think this video helped you, give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay up to date on daily math, science and some biomedical science videos, smash that subscribe button below. Thank you again for listening, and see you next time.